What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Life and Law with Mike and Bill. Unfortunately, our boy Mike is not in the house today, but he's appearing remotely. What's up, Michael?
Billy, I am on special assignment in an undisclosed location. I am dispensing justice. I'm settling cases, and I took some time out of my busy day to come and talk to you and the fine folks that are listening.
Well, I know I speak for everybody when I say we feel extremely lucky, Mike, extremely lucky. Now, if you're watching along on YouTube, you will see, though, that is not Mike. It looks like him, but that is not Mike sitting there. That is my favorite stuffed animal, my Mikey doll that I had made, and everybody here thinks I'm crazy. But we have a great show planned today.
That's not him?
That is not Mike. It looks like him, doesn't it? It's a good-looking stuffed animal, Mike. It really is.
It's an amazing likeness.
So we have a great show planned today. No guest today. It's going to be me, Mike, and as always, our producer, Lance. But we want to talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs and our man, Joel, trust the process, Embiid, who we just found out is going to be snubbed again on the NBA MVP, this time going again to Nikola Jokic for the second year in a row. But we'll talk a little bit about that and the playoffs. We'll talk very briefly about the big news. Unless you're living under a rock, you know there was a leak of a draft opinion that the Supreme Court is working on with regard to the Roe v. Wade argument. We'll talk a little bit about that. We want to talk about a recent settlement in the state of New Jersey involving Geets Diner in Williamstown for the overservice of alcohol. It resulted in a $6.5 million settlement. We'll talk all about that. And then, like we end every show, we will end with our Mike Speaks rant, which I understand may be related to the MVP discussion that we're going to have. So
maybe. We're going to find out.
So let's see. But let's get right into it, Michael. Now, full disclosure, for those who are following us, they know you're not a Sixers fan. Is that right?
Not a Sixers fan, and quite honestly, not a huge basketball fan in general. I really like college basketball more than pro basketball, but I follow it, tangentially. I'm not a big, huge basketball fan.
Wait a second. I want to stop right there. What was that word you used? That was a big word, Mike.
Tangentially.
Can you define that for me?
I can throw out a big word now and then, Bill.
Can you spell it? That's the real question.
Yes, I can. I won the spelling award, Bill, in 7th grade and 8th grade.
Wow.
At St. Henry's School in Bayonne, New Jersey. Went to the county spelling bee 2 years in a row.
Good job,
Mike. Do we have video of that?
No, they didn't have video back then.
No, this was prior to video being a common thing.
Yeah, that was probably
before cell phones and things.
Broadcast on the radio channel. Everyone would sit around their living room and listen to the radio back in the day. Did you ever remember that, Mike, or was TV from the time you were born? I can't remember how old you are.
You bastard.
That was a legitimate question. But anyway, let's talk.
That was not a legitimate question.
Let's talk about the NBA playoffs, and I want to focus on the Philadelphia 76ers because I'm selfish and I only care about the Philadelphia teams. But they even up the series on Sunday night, Mother's Day. So they lose 2 games in Miami without Joel. They come back to the Wells Fargo Center. They win both Game 3 and Game 4. And last night, man, James Harden turned back the clock.
Yeah, finally.
Did you watch the game, Mike?
I did not, no.
Yeah, so James Harden really turned back the clock. He has 16 points in the fourth quarter. I think he hit 4 3-pointers in the fourth quarter. But it's just amazing to me. And look, I did a video this morning basically saying that I thought it was a crime that Joel Embiid was not named the MVP. And I have guys who are responding underneath telling me, oh, you're crazy. Joel's not even the reason they won these 2 games. It was James Harden. There is no way that anyone can deny that if Joel Embiid is not on this 76ers team, they're a completely different basketball team. They're a completely different basketball team. I mean, it didn't look like they had a shot.
Point, Bill, is that, and that's where we're going to get into a little later when we talk about my issues with this entire MVP process. What you just said, is that an MVP? If the team is not the same without that one player, is that obviously the MVP of the team, but how do you compare that league-wide? Who's to say that this player was more valuable to his team than this player was to his? We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But let me ask you about this, because you said Embiid was basically, it was a crime that he lost out again. Are you suggesting that last year he should have been the MVP?
So last year, I felt that Embiid was the MVP. The problem was I just don't think he played enough games last year. You know, they were doing a lot of the load management. He was injured for a short period of time, so I don't think he played enough games. But this year, outside of these playoffs, what did he play, 68 games? So, I mean, he's been really pushing through. So, yeah, I do think he should have won last year, but I was okay with them not giving it to him last year because I just don't think he played enough games. This year, what else can the guy do? He leads the league in scoring.
And I agree with you. I agree. I mean, this year, I think, you know, given the numbers and his accomplishments, I mean, he led the league in scoring. I mean, he should have gotten more consideration than I think he got.
Yeah, and look, don't get me wrong. The guy who won, Nikola Jokic, is a stud as well. He's the only player in NBA history this past season to have 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists in one season. Not even Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain did that. So he's definitely an absolute stud. But Joel Embiid, if you watched any of the Sixers games this year, what he does for this team, he's the most valuable player. And I have people commenting under my video saying, oh, well, if a majority of his points weren't from foul shots, maybe we would agree with you. That's ridiculous because there's a reason that fouls are illegal in the NBA. And if they could guard him, then they wouldn't have to foul him. So if you don't like the fact that Joel Embiid makes his foul shots, guess what? Then stop fouling him. Exactly.
Yep. And, you know, the eye test on between Jokic and Embiid, I mean, Jokic is great, but if you watch both teams, Embiid is so much more dominant than Jokic is. It's
and
crazy.
Lance is a basketball guy.
Yes.
Yeah, Lance is a basketball. He knows his basketball. He knows a lot more than me and Mike do about basketball. But I'll say this, and maybe this is going to make me sound a little bit soft here, but I feel so bad for Joel Embiid, and not because of the MVP thing. Watching him play in these past two playoff games, and then what happened to him last year with Ben Simmons, what happened to him, I think it was 4 years ago when he fractured his orbital, the other orbital, and had to wear the mask and have surgery. This poor guy, he puts everything out on the line, and now he's got to play in these playoffs again. Now he's got the ligament strain in his thumb. He's got the fractured orbital bone. He's got to wear the mask. You could just see the guy, he's trying. He's playing through pain. He's playing through difficulty, but yet he keeps on pushing, and I just feel bad for him. You almost want him to just stay healthy, and he can't.
But, I mean, from a selfish point of view.
Stop with the feel bad.
Him not winning.
Don't feel bad for millionaires.
Him not winning the MVP might be the best thing for Sixers
he's going to be so motivated, man.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be so motivated. Now, Michael, you're right. He is a millionaire, and he's probably going to be very, very wealthy for the rest of his life because in addition to being a great basketball player, the guy is phenomenal on social media. He's got a massive following. He loves to troll people. But anyway, we can move on. This is not NBA talk only. So I want to switch gears briefly, and we'll come back, I guess, to the MVP argument in the Mike Speaks segment. But we would be remiss if we did not mention here what is going on with the Supreme Court. Now, we don't want to give our opinions with regard to whether or not we're pro-life or pro-choice or anything like that. That's not what we're here to talk about. But we did want to mention, as lawyers, the sanctity of the Supreme Court is extremely important to the survival of this country. And this is the first time, at least I think it is, the first time in history where a draft opinion was leaked to the public like this. And they need to figure out how that happened and prevent it from happening again. Because although in recent years, and this is such a political topic, the pro-choice, pro-life argument, but in recent years, the Supreme Court has been so politicized, and it really shouldn't be. I get it. Presidents are the ones who nominate, and the Senate have to affirm them. But ultimately, you're talking about judges who are making legal decisions. And I think it's important, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter what side of the argument you're on, that we all need to agree that the sanctity of the court has to remain for the legal system to remain intact the way that we've known it.
Yeah, Bill, did they even know yet how this leak occurred?
I don't believe they do. I don't think there's been any. I mean, there's been some speculation about how it probably happened. I know they're considering a case right now that involves abortion issues, and that's why the Roe v. Wade argument is back, and they're discussing it. But I don't think they know. And then to take it a step further, which I thought was just bad. Again, whether you agree or disagree about what they're deciding, but they released the home addresses of the Supreme Court justices. A website released them, and now people are going to their personal residences to picket and protest. And I disagree with that. I'm not saying I agree with the decisions, but I just think that the sanctity of the court. But, look, we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Every single channel out there, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all these channels. I mean, this is all they're talking about all day long. So we want to provide a little bit of a break from that. And as lawyers, we wanted to focus on a legal case. And I mentioned earlier that a recent case in New Jersey against Geets Diner in Williamstown, where a car accident occurred. And
nice diner. You ever been there, Billy?
I have been to Geets Diner.
I've been to Geets.
Yeah, I mean it's been there Good for diner. A long time, right? It's been there for a long time. Yeah. So what this case involved, and this is interesting, is it's a car accident case, and it involved a woman who I believe rear-ended another woman who was in the car with her 4-year-old daughter. And I don't even know if it was a daughter. It was just I think it just says a 4-year-old. I'm not sure.
It was both. She had her daughter and her son.
That's right. And the son, thankfully, was okay.
No, the son was injured. The daughter was not.
That's right. The son was the 2-year-old was not hurt. So the 36-year-old woman as well as her 4-year-old daughter were hurt. And they filed a lawsuit not only against the driver who caused the accident, but they also filed a lawsuit against Geets Diner. Now, that may be surprising to some, but in the state of New Jersey and in a majority of states, you have what's called dram shop actions. And what a dram shop action is if it can be proven that a establishment overserved a visibly intoxicated person, and then that visibly intoxicated person gets in their car, causes an accident that results in injuries to someone else, well, guess what? Not only is that drunk driver potentially responsible, obviously, the bar can be held responsible and have to pay damages. And that's what happened here in this case.
Exactly what happened, yep.
So the bar itself was obligated to pay $6 million, which was their insurance policy limits. And the driver was responsible to pay $500,000, which was her policy limits. So, Michael, have you dealt with dram shop cases in the past?
Not directly, no. I mean, obviously, I've most of my practice is revolving around workers' comp, but I've seen, in various firms that I've been working with, there are other lawyers in the firm who have handled those kinds of cases. And I think we may have one or two in the office right now, I think.
Yeah, we do.
But I've never dealt with them directly, but I know a little bit about it.
Yeah, and what it always comes down to, so Mike focuses his practice on workers' compensation. I focus more on personal injury, and unfortunately have had the benefit of being able to represent victims of drunk driving cases. And, it's always very, very sad. And the key always comes down to when you're attempting to prove whether or not the bar or the restaurant was in fact negligent is the visible intoxication. Because simply if they serve someone alcohol and they could not tell that person was drunk, and then that person goes and gets into an accident and is over the legal limit, they may not ultimately be responsible. So the key is, did they serve a visibly intoxicated person? Now, there's a small exception to that. If the person's under the age of 21, they can't serve them at all. So, so the analysis is, and I'm reading this right from the jury charge. So if you were on a New Jersey jury and you were told that you had to decide this case against Geets Diner, the judge is going to read the jury what we call jury charges. And it basically tells them these are the rules of the case. You decide the facts as the jury, but the judge gives you the law that you are going to apply. And what they say is a visibly intoxicated person means a state of intoxication accompanied by a perceptible act or series of acts which presents clear signs of intoxication. And when there's a minor involved, and a parent minor is a person under the age of 21 or an individual who under the circumstances was known or reasonably should have been known to be a minor. So again, this is always kind of a fact-sensitive analysis. And how do you prove whether someone was visibly intoxicated? Well, in the case involving Geets Diner, they did it a number of ways, and it was very, very savvy on their part. The attorneys request surveillance footage. You hear attorneys tell a lot, hey, if you get into an accident, it's important to contact an attorney right away. Well, here's why. One of the first things that a good lawyer should do, we do it here, is to send a spoliation of evidence letter immediately to the defendant. Mike knows what I'm talking about. And that letter is sent right away to the establishment that tells them that they need to preserve all evidence, surveillance footage, photographs, receipts, documents, to make them preserve it. And by adding the spoliation of evidence language, is if it could be proven after the fact that the restaurant or the bar destroyed video surveillance, they got our letter, but then after that, they got rid of the video. An instruction would then be read to the jury, which says you can assume, they call it an adverse inference. You can take an adverse inference. You can assume that the reason that they got rid of that video is because it would have been harmful to their case. And that's a really damaging piece of evidence. When a jury's told, you can assume they destroyed that because it was bad for them, well, that can hurt.
So my reading of the case, Bill, was that in this case, the video evidence did not show that this lady was stumbling or walking crooked or acting out of line or acting drunk. But the key that they focused in on was she made a mistake in totaling up her bill. When she added a tip to the amount of the bill, she did the addition wrong. And the court or the jury focused on that as saying she was probably not in her right mind, not thinking straight. She couldn't even do simple math. And that seemed to be the overwhelming point that they made with trying to determine whether or not she was drunk.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and that's part of the reason, too, you want to try to preserve it, because they were able to get the credit card statement, they were able to get the receipt showing that she got the math wrong. But what the video surveillance did show, and there was two different videos, there was one of her inside the restaurant, and then there was one of her going outside. But what it did show is, one, she was a known customer. She was embracing the waiters and waitresses. She embraced the bartender. So it was obvious that she had been there in the past. But towards the end of the evening, the video shows that she became more boisterous. She was aggressively using her hands during her conversations. So it was also made it undisputable about how much they served her, because they were able to prove that while she was inside, I believe she had 7 glasses of wine. And then she went outside, and the video surveillance, they couldn't tell whether or not she had any additional alcohol outside from the video. But when you're able to piece all of this together, so they knew who she was, they're able to see her coming in, they're able to see how many drinks she had, they're able to see how her personality and actions may have changed over time. But then these lawyers did something else that we do in these cases. They hire an expert, because we know that the New Jersey legal limit for blood alcohol content is 0.08. Well, in this case, her blood alcohol level was over 3 times the legal limit. It was 0.247%. So when you hire a toxicology expert, like they did in this case, the toxicology expert is able to make an opinion about, one, he said, this was the equivalent of 11 and a half drinks based off of her body weight, based off of the blood alcohol content. And then they can also make an opinion about when someone should become visibly intoxicated. So you use all of those pieces of evidence, the video surveillance, the receipt, how many drinks she had, what her blood alcohol content was, and now the toxicology expert, and it appears that this was a strong case, and that's why this case settled. This $6.5 million was not a jury verdict. It did not go to a judge and a jury. This was actually a settlement that was done at a mediation. And Mike, you've done mediations before. I've done mediations before. Some people may know what that is, but what's a mediation, Mike?
Well, it's when both sides get together with a mediator, which is a lot of times a retired judge who has had experience in that particular area of the law that they're dealing with. And the mediator here's both sides first privately and then together, and tries to, bring the two sides together to a reasonable conclusion or a reasonable settlement that satisfies everyone. It's a great process.
Yeah, and the nice part about mediations is they're usually non-binding, meaning that the case does not have to resolve that day. This is just a way to try to facilitate these negotiations. But like Mike said, when you have a retired judge or you have a well-trained mediator, they know the issues of the case. They're able to use their experience to kind of they don't make legal decisions, but they can talk to the parties in a way where they're knowledgeable and say, look, my experience, I think you're going to have a hard time with this piece of evidence in front of a jury. Or, with my experience, you never know how a judge is going to decide, but I think this particular legal issue you may have a problem with. We spent a majority of our show last week talking about hearsay and how judges make decisions to the hearsay exceptions. Well, the same thing happens with other pieces of evidence. Judges are going to make evidentiary rulings about things that are either going to come into evidence or are not going to come into evidence. So this particular way, mediations can be a very effective thing. It avoids not only the stresses of having to go through a trial, it really can eliminate a lot of the unnecessary costs as well. Because, I mentioned in this particular case, they had to hire a toxicology expert. Well, if this case went to a trial and not just a mediation, in addition to having the parties testify, you're going to have the experts testify, and not only the toxicology expert. You're going to have the medical experts for the injured woman, the medical experts for the injured child. And what we know about experts is they're experts for a reason, and they're going to charge a lot of money to take time from their busy day to come to court and sometimes have to testify for a half a day or an entire day. So the mediation process can be, very, very helpful. But, hopefully this woman, and especially the 4-year-old daughter, are able to use this money to prepare their lives in a better way. They're going to have to deal with these injuries. Obviously, they had significant injuries. The 36-year-old mother sustained fractures to her torso, her leg, and her arm that required multiple surgical procedures. And then, I'm sorry, I said her daughter. Her son, who was 4, suffered leg and facial fractures that left him with a misshapen and scarred face, which also required multiple surgeries. So, I tell people all the time, being a personal injury lawyer, I get asked a lot is, hey, what do I got to do to get a good case? And I tell people, you don't want a good case, because that means you've had really bad injuries. Personal injury lawyers sometimes get a bad name and a bad rap, and people think that you get rear-ended and then you can just go hire a lawyer and get a ton of money. Well, that's not how it works. These clients are legitimately injured. Things need to be proven with a reasonable degree of medical certainty. These cases are legitimate cases, and I'm sure there are personal injury lawyers out there that give the rest of us bad names, but a majority of us are helping victims who have been seriously injured at no fault of their own. And it's a sad time, when you get that call from someone who got injured and all they were doing was minding their business at a red light.
And really, every other establishment, seeing this, hopefully it changes the way they behave and how they operate.
It's a great point. Because,
if you can create some sort of social change, that's an important part of these cases.
1,000%. And that's the reason that we like to broadcast these types of results, and we want to get publicity on these types of results, because if it can stop one bar or one restaurant from over-serving that next drunk driver, that's something that we would love to see happen. So, a good result, hopefully they're able to move on and this money is going to be able to help them. Now, one last thing, because I'm sure some of you may be thinking out there, well, that $6.5 million, what's the 4-year-old going to do with all that money? They're only 4. Does that go to the parents? Does that go to her? How does that all work? So New Jersey has a great law, and a lot of states have laws like this, but New Jersey has a great law that before any settlement involving a minor can become official, you have to go down to the court for what's called a friendly hearing. And they call it a friendly hearing because that's what it is. It's very, very friendly. You're going to be in front of the judge. The other party's going to be there. But everyone there is trying to get this settlement approved. So it's not a very adversarial event. It's a friendly event. You're trying to get the case settled. But what the judge is going to make sure is a couple of things. First, they want to make sure that this is a fair settlement for the child. Is it in the best interest of the child? Is this fair? They also want to make sure that no one is forcing the parents or the legal guardian of the child to enter into this settlement. And then finally, that money does not go to the mother or the father or the legal guardian. It gets put away until the minor reaches the age of majority. So it could either do one of two things. It can go into the surrogate's office, and when it stays in a bank account earning interest, and when that child becomes 18 years old, they get a big check for the lump sum. But what a lot of families do, and I think this is a very smart thing to do, is they create an annuity where now their child is going to get lump sums of money at various times, maybe 18, 21, 24, various times throughout their life. But what the judge will do is they will look at that annuity. They want to make sure it's an A-rated company. They want to make sure, again, that this annuity is in the best interest of that child. So it's a really great law. So I don't know how they broke up this $6.5 million, because it looks like that was the total number. But depending on how much of that settlement is apportioned to the 4-year-old, that's going to have to get approved by a judge, and that money will sit until that young girl turns 18, and if they set up an annuity, maybe longer. So that's a great thing that we have in place. We're going to finish our show like we finish every show with a Mike Speaks rant. So we started off talking about the MVP award for the NBA, but my understanding is, Mike, you have a problem with the MVP award in all sports.
I got a problem with the MVP award process in general across all sports. And this is the thing, and I touched on it earlier. Joel Embiid, let's start with him. He's clearly the most valuable player on his team. But we got to take a look at what's the definition? What are the people who are voting on this, whether it's the sports writers or in some sports the general managers, what are they looking at? How can they say that Joel Embiid is more valuable to his team than somebody else is to their team? Do they have to take into consideration the success of the team? For example, I mean, you may recall, and for people who are as old as me may remember many years ago in baseball, Montreal Expos had a player by the name of Andre Dawson. The Expos, or no, I'm sorry, he was with the Cubs at the time. My mistake. He was with the Cubs. The Cubs finished last in their division, one of the worst teams in baseball. Yet Dawson was voted the most valuable player. I mean, I don't understand how that can be. What value does he have to a team that has no success? So I struggle with that. It's not only, one being more valuable than the other, but what value do you have at all if the team doesn't have success? And yet they'll tell you all the time, they don't look at the success of the team. That's why they make the decision at the end of the regular season, because they don't want to know how far a team goes in the playoffs, because that may influence somebody's opinion. And I don't like it. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how else to do it, but maybe they shouldn't do it at all. Why do you have to have a most valuable player? And I just don't like it in any sport. Yeah,
it's almost as if because usually the way they vote on it is they're not voting on the most valuable, they're voting on the best. They're voting on who had the best season, who had the best individual season, no matter what sport it is. But you're right, when you really look at who was the most valuable to their team, if the team sucked, how could that person have been so valuable? You're right. They almost have to have some success. Now, I would go even as far as saying, Mike, I think in the NBA, in the NHL, in Major League Baseball, and even in the NFL, that they include the playoffs. Now, I know the playoffs in the NHL has the Conn Smythe, and then there's the NBA.
Right, they have their own. They have a playoff MVP.
Yeah, now the NHL does it right, because the NHL though makes it the Conn Smythe. I think it's the Conn Smythe, isn't it? Isn't that what it's called?
That's correct.
Yeah, the Conn Smythe. It not only looks at the finals, right? It looks at the entire
That's
playoffs.
right. They look at the entire playoffs.
And playoffs. But in the NBA, it's not the whole playoffs. It's the NBA Finals MVP. In the Super Bowl, it's the Super Bowl MVP. So you could become the Super Bowl MVP. All you have to do is have one good game. You could have a good game in the Super Bowl. I mean, look at. Nick Foles also had an awesome Minnesota Vikings NFC Championship game. But, he won the Super Bowl MVP because of his performance in that game. But it's almost as if you need to look at, especially in the NBA, there's no award for round one, round two, round three.
Right.
So I don't like it either, Mike. I agree with you. I think if you're going to award the best player, award the best player. Now, the NFL, I think, tries to do that. They have an offensive player of the year. They have a defensive player of the year. Mm-hmm. And they have the MVP. But it still always comes down to whoever had the best season, most likely.
But I'm sure you know the answer to this too, Bill. In football, in the NFL, there has been one Super Bowl MVP that played for the losing team.
In football,
who that is? In football.
No.
Super Bowl MVP
Mike's always filled with knowledge like
lost
this.
the game.
Tell me who.
Chuck Howley, Dallas Cowboys.
And what year was that, Mike?
Linebacker. That was, I believe, Super Bowl. I'm going to say 5.
Yeah,
Super Bowl 5.
I don't go back that far.
Not sure on that.
But
it's actually happened, I think, 4 times in the NHL.
Well, I know one of the times it happened in the NHL. In the NBA, in the Conn Smythe went to our man Ron Hextall when they lost.
Correct.
What was it, 1987?
That would have been 85 or 87. Yeah, one of those 2 years.
I'm looking
lost
it up.
In the finals to Edmonton.
I was in middle school. I remember that.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. 1987. How about me? That was pretty good, Mike. He also won the Vezina that year. That was an unbelievable year for our boy Ronnie Hextall. But, Mike, I think this is one time where I agree with you that I think the most valuable player needs to be changed to the best player.
Sid, I want you to write that down. Make sure this is recorded. He said it. He
did.
Agrees with me.
I do. That's only because you look so damn cute sitting over there as your stuffed animal. Again, for those who are...
Again, when they're going to a stuffed animal. It's not a stuffed animal. It's my alter ego.
It's a stuffed Michael. Well, that is a full show. What is this, episode 8 or episode 9?
Episode 8. And just to add in, our MVP today is Mike taking time out of his busy schedule to...
That is very true. And he's not the best. He wasn't the best. I was the best, but he was the most valuable. You see that, Mike?
We'll let you guys argue over that later.
Did you see how we did that?
There's the difference.
Do you see how we did that?
There's the difference.
Well, look, if this is our 9th episode, did you say it's our 9th or our 8th?
8th.
You're right, 8th episode. My contract's only for 10, so I may not be back for episode 11. So you guys got me 2 more times, maybe. But as always, guys, thanks for listening. I hope you were entertained. I hope you learned a little bit for our legal analysis of the Dram Shop case. But if you have any questions, our law firm is Grungo Colarulo. We're always happy to help if we can. And as always, thank you to Lance, our producer, and Michael. I can't wait to see your face. Hopefully, you're back in the office soon, bud.
Well, if I can catch a flight, it's as I said, I'm in a distant, faraway location. But I'll see you soon.
All right, be safe, Mike.
All right, thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.